Come to Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence for retirees looking for an ideal rental setting to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We offer bright 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, wellness and entertainment programs, all with a friendly community spirit on beautiful grounds. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
The Annual Catholic Appeal. 60 years of changing lives in Western Massachusetts. Sharing, teaching, reaching. Respecting the dignity of life at all ages. Our Catholic mission calls us to be Christ in our world right now. Please donate to the Annual Catholic Appeal today and help us put faith in action.
Coming up on this edition of Reel to Reel, 3 men are ordained to priestly ministry in the Diocese of Springfield. We'll have complete coverage just ahead on this edition of Reel to Reel. Hello and welcome to Reel to Reel. The month of June has gotten off to an exciting start with the ordination of 3 new priests in the Diocese of Springfield, ordained earlier today by Springfield Bishop Mitchell Rosansky at St. Michael's Cathedral. And as Carolee McGrath reports, they each traveled a different road to this special day, but share the same desire to provide faith-filled service to the Catholic Church.
Surrounded by family, friends, and parishioners from across the Diocese of Springfield, 3 deacons processed up the aisle of St. Michael's Cathedral, ready to dedicate their lives to Christ and His Church.
We gather together today in this church, giving thanks to God for the call that has been given to them and the generous way in which they are responding to that call.
Springfield Bishop Mitchell Rosansky was the principal celebrant for the special Mass called the Rite of Ordination, in which he ordained Father Paul Norman, Father Dennis Scavera, and Father John Huey Lay to the priesthood.
We ask God to give to them the blessings that they need in fulfilling His grace for them in priesthood. So it's a wonderful day for the diocese as we add 3 new priests to help to serve our people.
All 3 express their fidelity to God and His Church.
Relying on the help of the Lord God and our Savior Jesus Christ, we choose these men, our brothers, for the order of priesthood.
Thanks be to God.
The ordination rite begins with the calling of the candidate. Bishop Rosansky asks about the worthiness of the candidates. As the rite continued, the candidates lie prostrate on the altar as a sign of total submission to God, as the congregation sang the Litany of Saints.
Lord, have mercy. Pray for us.
This is followed by the laying on of hands, the most solemn part of the ceremony. Father Scavera has been assigned to St. Anne's in Chicopee.
Basically, I'm going to be submitting to the Lord and His will, and whatever the Lord wants to, how He wants to use me on a particular day, in each person's life, that's up to Him. I'm just going to be myself.
Father Norman has been assigned to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Northampton.
I'm very excited, but I also feel unworthy, and I think that's the reality of this call, this vocation to the priesthood, is that we're all unworthy of this call, but God calls us despite ourselves. And so to just give thanks to Almighty God for this vocation, for this blessing of this day, and for, God willing, a long and joyful ministry. And what I'm looking forward to the most is just serving the people of God.
Father Huey Lay has been assigned to Mary Mother of the Church in Lee.
I don't think I have any feeling right now. I guess nervous in a sense, but not exactly. Because all of the promises were made already, and so I guess it's another step up, affirming that if I'm going to follow the Lord to wherever He's going to lead me to.
There is no doubt that following a vocation takes courage, and it certainly goes against the tide. But these men say they're willing to make the sacrifice and encourage all of us to listen to God's call in our own lives, to trust Jesus completely, and to pray for more vocations.
There's so many distractions in our world, and it's really edifying for me, and I'm sure for all of our people, to see that through all of the noise and distractions, that these three men have discerned this call to the priesthood and are willing to give their lives to Christ in service of His church. So I rejoice with the rest of our church and with the great example they give to us of their witness.
Now there are currently 7 men in priestly formation for the Diocese of Springfield. Father Michael Wood and Father David Darcy are the co-directors of vocations.
So it's an exciting day for the 3 men who were ordained this morning at St. Michael's, but it's an exciting day for the diocese because the diocese has 3 new priests, which means 3 new men who will be saying Mass, who will be anointing the sick, hearing the confessions of those who need God's forgiveness, being at the bedside of those who are dying, offering God's consolation, peace, and grace. So not only is it an exciting day for them, for the vocation office, but it's really a day of joy for the diocese at large.
The newest priests of the diocese look forward to bringing Christ's love and mercy into the world. Reporting for Reel to Reel in Springfield, I'm Carolee McGrath.
Thanks, Carolee, and best wishes to all 3 newly ordained priests. Starting on Monday, you can view the ordination ceremony online at iobserve.org. And we'll continue our special ordination coverage as we introduce you to Fathers Lay, Scavera, and Norman and learn about the journeys that led them to answer God's call. It's all still to come on this special edition of Reel to Reel.
I have loved you.
The Chalice of Salvation, your weekly spiritual connection. I'm Passionist Brother Terrence Scanlon, your Chalice host, inviting you to take time out of your busy day and join us Sunday morning. We welcome Father Warren Savage as our Mass presider and celebrate the 7th Sunday of Easter. The Chalice of Salvation, Sunday mornings at 10 on 22 News, WWLP, and coming up next on Albany's Fox 23, WXXA.
Butcher, baker, candlestick maker, I didn't care what they grew up to be as long as they were happy. To give up marriage and children just seems like too much to walk away from.
He seems to think he's making a real difference in people's lives, and he's so happy. Isn't that what's most important?
I never would have imagined our son as a Catholic priest.
Come to Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence for retirees looking for an ideal rental setting to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We offer bright 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily Mass, restaurant-style dining, wellness and entertainment programs, all with a friendly community spirit on beautiful grounds. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
The Annual Catholic Appeal. 60 years of changing lives in Western Massachusetts. Sharing, teaching, reaching. Respecting the dignity of life at all ages. Our Catholic mission calls us to be Christ in our world right now. Please donate to the Annual Catholic Appeal today and help us put faith in action.
One of you is going to follow God as a priest or a nun. For Father Dewey Lay, that prediction made at his confirmation became an ember that burned quietly in his heart for years. The newly ordained priest says if God is calling you to serve him, running away from him isn't an option. Kathy Harrington reports on the young priest's road to ordination.
I think the first questions that when I went into my room was basically what just happened.
Father Dewey Lay is describing his arrival at St. John's Seminary in Brighton in 2013.
I was the youngest when I came in that particular year.
Saying yes to God's call, Dewey Lay was on his way to becoming a priest. but this journey began more than 8,500 miles away.
I was born and baptized in Vietnam, and I came here when I was 12. I was turning 12 and I came here. And then I moved with my family to Amherst.
Born in the Central Highlands village of Kon Tum, Father Lay grew up surrounded by his cousins and within walking distance of his church. Arriving in the United States with his parents, 2 older sisters, a younger brother, aunts and uncles, and 10 cousins, the Newman Center in Amherst became their parish.
Confirmed here in this parish by Monsignor Yajo. I think it was during the homily or one of the reading that, it talks about being the priest of Christ, and you are being called to serve Him, and I felt that was directed toward me. I think during the homily when Monsignor Yajo said, one of you is going to become, going to follow God, either become a priest or a nun, and we only had like 8 of us, and so I guess that felt really personal.
About that time, former vocations director Father Gary Daly arrived at the Newman Center and set up displays of vocations materials.
So I walked by and it's like, I look at, at the table and I grab, the DVD and the pamphlet and a few other stuff. And I go home and I put it in my drawers.
With both parents working on the UMass campus, the graduating high school seniors' choice for college seemed logical. But what to study? Father Lay tried engineering, ROTC, business, and psychology without finding his direction.
As I was going through my struggles in college, especially after my first year, as I find my peace here, I started to think more, not think, but it's the feeling of the attractiveness of going into the priesthood. And so as I go to Mass, I look at the priest on the altar and start to imagine myself up there, and then I started to laugh.
Laugh and move on. But Father Lay says the thoughts continued, and eventually he was going to daily Mass.
I started to think more of, I guess, that attractiveness. Maybe I should think about this more, and so I keep laughing at it. It's like, that's not for me. I don't like to study. It's like no one will understand me. It's like, there's the cultural difference and there's the language barrier and everything else that I just go, that was when I started to feel that, as being called, like, you should try it.
Digging out the long-buried DVD and pamphlets, he watched and read and checked out the website and still tried to convince himself he wasn't one of those guys. He considered talking to Father Gary, but his feet took him out the front door of the Newman Center instead.
Like a month or 2 later, it's like, this urging, it's like, okay, I need to go talk to him and ask him, about this.
And again, his feet took him straight out the door.
So the third time I was in church, and so that was when, it's when you feel this intense fear, but it's a warm fear. I don't know how to describe it. Got like you just sitting there and you get someone hit you in the head and you just shock, and then it's basically forces me to kneel down in front of the tabernacle, and so that's when I, it's the feeling of what are you doing? Why are you wasting time? And so I stood up and I walked down the hall and I turned to Father Gary's office, and he was sitting at his chair, and I just came in, sat down, and talked to him. So I told him, I told him I don't know what to do. Like I had this feeling of God is calling me, to be His instrument.
With that, all of the excuses and the feelings of unworthiness poured out of him. Father Daly explained that none of us is worthy to follow Christ, but then he extended an invitation.
And he asked me that day of, am I willing to drop everything and go to Boston? And so that's how it all started.
So the boy who never left home asked to borrow the family car to interview for the priesthood and enter the seminary. Completing his bachelor's degree in philosophy, earning another in sacred theology, Father Lay also earned a master's degree in divinity. He offers these words of advice.
for young men who's coming in, my advice would be not to do it alone, because this discerning alone is very painful and very difficult.
He says it is the grace of God that moves you to follow him. Spending his last year in seminary assigned to Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament Church in Westfield, Father Lay learned about the pastoral needs of a parish. The parish family will have a chance to share in the joy of his ordination. First, though, Father Lay will celebrate Mass at the Newman Center. Then, a Mass in Vietnamese at St. Paul the Apostle Church in Springfield. And on June 8th, Father Lay returns to Westfield for a Mass of Thanksgiving and a dinner with the parish family that has come to love him. Days later, he travels with his parents to Vietnam to offer a Mass of Thanksgiving at his home parish in Kon Tum. For Real to Real, I'm Kathy Harrington.
Ordained to the priesthood today at age 59, Father Dennis Scavera at first thought he was too old to become a Catholic priest. Having had a military career and a long marriage, he is now ready to contribute in serving the church through a second vocation. For the last 5 years, Father Dennis Scavera has been studying and living at Pope St. John XXIII National Seminary, a seminary dedicated specifically to men 30 years of age and older who are responding to a call to priestly ministry. Father Scavera hails from Chicopee and was raised in West Springfield. He served in the Air Force for 20 years. Although he was born and raised a Catholic, he said he spent many of his adult years away from the Catholic Church.
I drifted away from the church before I joined the military.
Standing at 6'3" tall, Father Scavera says he spent many a day at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, in the loading, unloading, and maintenance of weapons and their systems on fighter aircrafts, F-16s and F-15s.
I liked F-15s better, and I'll tell you why. Because I didn't hit my head so often. The F-16s were a lot lower, and the first 6 months of working on it, I always would hit my head. And eventually I learned, just like a rat learns.
Father Scavera retired in 2002 from the Air Force and began working at Westover for a federal contractor on the base. Along with serving in the military, he was also married to his wife Pauline for 31 years until her unexpected death.
In 2013, my wife passed away, and 31 years to the day that we got married, on April 2nd, she passed away. And I never imagined that grief was real. I mean, I heard about grief, but when you experience it, it just, where it comes from is beyond me, but it just came. And I remember that. That's a life-changing moment. I knew that I had changed when she died, and I didn't like it, but I didn't blame God.
Yet he says his wife's death left him not knowing what the rest of his life would bring. He did have his 3 stepchildren and grandchildren, and his faith was stronger. He was working toward a degree in sacred theology from Catholic Distance University, also serving as a Eucharistic minister and lector at Sacred Heart Parish in Springfield. Father Scavera attributes his strengthened and renewed faith to prayer.
Probably in the mid to late 90s, I started coming back to the church. And I remember that pretty much, whether it was from, I believe it was from prayer, my wife praying, and other people, because we would go to ecumenical prayer sessions, and I remember people praying, talking about Our Lady, which was, believe it or not, was very relatively new to me in that regard.
Several months following his wife's passing, Father Scavera says he was sitting in his office at Westover when his good friend and boss, James Carey, came in with a question.
Dennis, I need to ask you something. Have you ever thought about becoming a priest? You know, the Catholic Church needs priests.
The question took him by surprise, he says, initially, but that he had considered the priesthood and thought he was too old. His friend urged him to call the vocations office of the Diocese of Springfield. He then learned of this seminary specifically for delayed vocations, entering into pre-theology 5 years ago. Over the past year, he has been serving on the weekends at St. Michael's Church in East Longmeadow. His time in the seminary, he says, has been a time filled with personal and spiritual growth.
You hear about the saints and how they are able to endure amazing things, and even to the point of being killed. And I can honestly understand, not that I could do it by far shot, but you know, when you trust God, somehow He works it out.
In the seminary chapel, Father Scavera says he would often pray about how he would pursue his vocation. He had been reading and thinking about how he had grown in his love for God.
Whatever's coming up for me, I'm not nervous about it. I'm excited, yes, but I'm not nervous because I know He's going to be there with me the whole time.
And Father Scavera knows his wife Pauline is praying for him as well.
And I pray to her quite often. And I thank her. And I think she has a lot to do with, because at first, when she first passed, there was a lot of hard feelings, you know, things that I regretted. But those things have healed. And the love for my wife is still there. And I don't think it's ever going to go away. It's always going to be there. And so she's a big part of my ministry. And I think she would say, good job. I hope she would, or she don't let it go to your head. But, you know, keep it up.
Father Scavera will celebrate his first Mass of Thanksgiving tomorrow, June 2nd at 11:30 a.m. at St. Michael's Church in East Longmeadow. Finally today, Father Paul Norman's mission to be an instrument of Christ's love and mercy led him first to a career in nursing. But while caring for one very special patient, the call to priesthood returned, culminating in his ordination today in Springfield. Rebecca Drake has his vocation story.
The first call to priesthood came at a young age for Father Paul Norman.
When I was about 14 years old, I was at a penance service with my father, and Monsignor heard my confession at the time, and I remember at that moment, I can't recall what he said exactly, but I remember I got the impression that God wanted me to do for other people what Monsignor just did for me.
That priest, Monsignor Homer Goslin, was pastor of Father Paul's home parish, Notre Dame in North Adams.
He was always a shining example of what it meant to be a good priest, to be kind, to be compassionate. He was loving in all of his deeds.
Thoughts of the priesthood were replaced by those of dating and marriage during his high school years, and inspired by his mother's example, Paul pursued a nursing degree.
I worked in geriatrics, followed in the footsteps of my mother, and also with people with developmental disabilities.
But Father Paul says the examples of faith provided by his family and his parish priest stayed with him throughout his nursing career.
Well, we're all called to holiness. We're all called to love others. And so that was primarily the goal throughout my nursing career, was to love.
And although it would be 30 years from that first call to the priesthood to his ordination day here at St. Michael's Cathedral, Father Paul says that God's grace was with him every step of the way. Eventually, one patient in particular, a quadriplegic man, would become a powerful instrument of God's grace for the future priest.
We were having a conversation one day, and we were exchanging blessings in our lives. And I asked him, I said, well, what was the greatest blessing in your life? And he said, breaking my neck. In and through that experience, he came to find God in a special and unique way.
The testimony of this man, who now paints sacred art with a paintbrush held in his mouth, was a turning point in Paul Norman's life.
And it brought me back to that initial call when I was 14 years old. It brought me back there immediately, and I knew, oh, God's still calling. You know, we may not immediately follow his call, but when God calls, he never stops.
A period of discernment led him to the St. John the 23rd Seminary in Weston, Massachusetts, and in his final year of formation to All Saints Parish in Ware to serve as a deacon.
I think after being with Deacon Paul for almost a year, I think he's a very joyful person, and most of all, I think he enjoys to work with the homebound people.
The pastor, called Father Peter by his parishioners, notes another special devotion that the new priest will bring to his ministry, praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
And probably he's going to say that this is where we should start. To go for the Holy Hour, pray in the front of Blessed Sacrament, and ask him for graces and advices in our life.
As he begins his priesthood journey, Father Paul says he is grateful for all those who have guided him to this point, including Father Peter.
I've been blessed to have wonderful formators in my life. Father Peter has been a shining example of what it means to be a priest, as well as what it means to work incredibly hard to serve the people of God.
For the three men ordained on the 6th anniversary of his own ordination, Father Peter has this advice.
I would say the major advice, and I would say it is, first of all, to pray, and always remember that the prayer life is the most important in our priesthood.
Father Peter also advises the new priests to listen to and learn from the pastors, the bishop, and their brother priests, and stay close to the people they serve.
We need to be with them. We shouldn't be somewhere in the office spaces or in different places, but we need to be among the people. That will be my prayer and my advice as well to them.
And Father Paul is ready to heed this advice.
The Lord called me home, and he called me home to serve the people of this diocese for a reason, at this time and in this place, here and now.
As he heads for his first assignment, Father Paul carries with him the best wishes of the Ware parishioners who have embraced him as a family member.
God bless him, and I hope he stays how he is. Thank you. I love you, Father.
A blessed beginning for the priesthood of Father Paul Norman. For Real to Real, I'm Rebecca Drake.
And for this week, that's Real to Real. Congratulations to these new priests, and remember, you can view either the entire ordination or the segments on today's show starting on Monday at iobserve.org, where you can also find updates anytime on news involving the Catholic Church. So head over to our news and information site, iobserve.org. We also have updates on our Facebook page daily with news of what our reporters are working on. So check that out and like us at Catholic Communication. And St. Anthony of Padua Parish in Chicopee will hold a 9-day novena leading up to their parish patron saint's Holy Day, beginning this Tuesday, June 4th, with a 6 p.m. Mass, a parish festival next Saturday, and a special Mass on the Feast of St. Anthony on Thursday, June 13th. We have a link for more information at iobserve.org. And St. Anthony Maronite Church in Springfield will also mark this feast day on June 13th with a special Mass at noon celebrated by Monsignor Christopher Conley and a 6 p.m. procession followed by a healing Mass. We have more on these events also at iobserve.org. I will see you back here next week at this same time for another edition of Real to Real, your window on the world around you. Have a great week.
Real to Real is a production of the Catholic Communications Corporation, funded in part by the annual Catholic Appeal, and the support of you, our faithful viewers.